computers come with a lifetime parts and labor warranty, so you can stay mega productive with total peace of mind for the lifetime of your computer. We have brand new PC laptops, desktop computers from $11.99 or only $29 a month. And again, they're backed by a lifetime warranty. To make it extra awesome, we're doing zero interest for a year on approved credit. So run into any one of our PC Laptops locations right now or check us out at PCLaptops.com. That's PCLaptops.com. Because at PC Laptops, we really love you.
Boyd Matheson on the pitfalls of politics.
Sadly, both political parties are more interested in scoring political points than they are solving the American people's problems. They're playing a zero-sum game, and it's not zero-sum. It's everybody coming together. We have to come together. Compromise has integrity. That's a big part of what's going wrong in our nation's capital and in many conversations around the country.
Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson, 1 to 3 on KSL News Radio.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's high-yield savings certificates. Here's Ricky Meese.
The delays have cleared, and we're in the final clearing of an vehicle fire eastbound I-80 near Wanship in Summit County. And for those in Davis County, police activity has closed northbound 4th North at Main Street in Bountiful. Advanced Window Products, high-efficiency windows, $2,000 off 10 windows or more for a limited time. 801-850-9100 or advancedwindowsusa.com. From the KSL Traffic Center, I'm Ricky Meese.
KSL weather, a high of 92 today will be the warmest of the coming week. Mostly cloudy with a chance of thunderstorms this afternoon and tomorrow. And right now we're looking at 86 degrees and mostly cloudy skies at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Try again. The headlines, of course, continue to say that former President Donald Trump continues to be the front runner in the national polls when it comes to the race for the nomination for the Republicans for 2024. But as always, we want to get past the headlines, look underneath that, as the former president may not be as stable or strong as those numbers might seem. Legal issues continue to do two critical things as it relates to a presidential campaign: chew up time and money. So does the former president have enough of either of those to be the one to contend with current President Joe Biden? Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
Well, you can look past the polling numbers, as we've continued to say, that it's not just the top-line polling numbers. You have to look at a whole bunch of things beyond, and that's why we have to think again. And helping us think again today, Henry Olsen, of course, is Washington Post columnist, senior fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center, and a great piece in the Washington Post today talking about the former president's legal woes, not just from a legal woes standpoint, but what it actually means in the context of a presidential campaign. And Henry, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me back.
So let's start with just kind of the top line dollars and cents of all of this. Money is a big factor in a presidential race. Lay out the case in terms of where the former president is going to continue to struggle just on the dollars and cents of it all.
Well, what the reports that came in over the last 48 hours show is that Donald Trump spent over $40 million in the last few months on legal fees out of his campaign account. So you hear that he raises $50 million or $80 million, but he's not spending it on the campaign. He's spending it on himself and on his legal defense. And if that continues, what that means is that he's not going to have the money to run a campaign against Joe Biden. That Biden and Democrats spent almost $2.6 billion with a B dollars in 2020. If the president is using his campaign money to pay for his legal fees, he's not going to be able to come close to what the Democrats can spend.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, and I think it also becomes something over time as some of those donors continue to have to evaluate, am I sending this money in? Am I giving them my credit card so that the former president can become the president again, or is this just more of a legal strategy versus a political strategy, I think that has to be wearing, I think, in terms of the donor base over time.
Absolutely. You've got big donors and average small donors. And Trump does very well with small donors. And they're going to have to ask, if I'm spending $25 and spending it to the email or the text that I get from the Trump committee, do I care that it's being spent on legal fees as opposed to the campaign? I think some of them are going to care. And then on the big donor side, the question is, if you're given big 6, 7, 8-figure checks, what you're basically doing right now is keeping the president's lawyers well fed. And that may be not what you want. You may care more about Donald Trump actually being in the White House. And if he starts seeing big donor defections, that could really dry up his campaign.
Yeah, that's a fascinating component. And I love the other element that you got into in this, Henry, and that is this idea of time is the other precious, priceless commodity to a presidential nominee or a presidential campaign. Break that down for us.
Look, when you're actively campaigning, you are flying around the country. You're having a rally in Las Vegas. You're then doing a rally in Denver and so forth and so on. That takes time. Well, if he's the defendant in 4 different criminal cases, that takes time too. There'll be time you'll have to spend in the courtroom. There'll be time you have to spend with lawyers. And I'll bet you not an inconsiderable sum, $10, that Donald Trump is going to care more about keeping himself out of jail than about campaigning, which is to mean that if you nominate Donald Trump, you're nominating somebody who's not actually going to campaign against Joe Biden because he has to campaign in the courtroom with the judge and the jury to keep himself out of jail. That's not a good look for conservatives.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting perspective in terms of, is this a legal strategy? Is this a political strategy for the former president? And then how do voters really mesh with that, or how do they start to perceive that over time? We know that President Biden had a very under the radar, some say under the basement campaign for 2020. Part of that was COVID connected, of course. Is it possible for someone to kind of split their time that way and not be out amongst the people, not doing the big rallies as we've seen in the past?
The thing is, that was during the COVID year. I don't think that Joe Biden is going to be running around the country the way the Republican nominee, if they weren't encumbered by legal cases, would. He's president, and also he's 80 years old now. He'll be 81, almost 82. But I do think already you can see that he can do one event a day, a couple of times a day, and I expect that you will see that in the non-COVID time. And if Donald Trump is sitting in a courtroom and you've got, on the one hand, one man trying to be president, the other man trying to keep himself out of jail, how do you think independent voters are going to react to that? They may not want either man, but if they have to choose one, who do they want to choose? Probably not the guy who's trying to keep himself out of jail.
Yeah, and so as you look at that, Henry, from your perspective and your unique perch there, how do you see that playing out, especially as we get into fall, once we get past Labor Day and things start to heat up a little bit? How do you see it? What's the messaging look like? What does the strategy look like overall for the Republicans as they face a large field and a former president, again, dealing with both the legal and the political side?
The first thing you have to recognize is that a large part of Donald Trump's support is not going anywhere, okay? But you're not campaigning for that. You're not campaigning for the 30 to 37% of the Republican Party that will never leave the president. You're campaigning for the people who, like Trump, think he's being unfairly treated but are willing to look at somebody else. And the fact is, right now, based on the polls, those people like Ron DeSantis as much or almost as much as they like Donald Trump. It may be that by September they'll like Tim Scott as much. We don't know yet. Scott is still getting known to people. I think a smart strategy for whoever is in that sweet zone, the person who appeals to the voter who can go either way, is to say, look, you are right to think that Trump is being unfairly targeted. But you have to ask yourself, how are we going to get Joe Biden out of the office? And given that Joe Biden has weaponized the Department of Justice, that would be the messaging. Given that he's tied the former president down, he's doing that so that he can get reelected. So maybe you shouldn't give him the choice he wants. Maybe you should vote for me, and I'm 80% as good as Trump, and I don't have 4 legal suits trying to tying me down. And thing is, we don't know how that message will land because no one's made it yet.
Yeah, and just give us a quick look forward here, a couple of weeks down the road. August 23rd, Milwaukee, the first of the debates. Not sure whether the former president will be on the stage or not, but there are a large number that will be. Do you suspect that this is where we'll start to really hear? We've had a few. Chris Christie, Asa Hutchinson have poked a little bit in terms of, hey, this just isn't going to work under indictment. Do you expect that on that August 23rd to start seeing the rest of the gang start to maybe carry that tune slightly differently?
Yeah, I don't, because it's too early. All of them have to make their own cases first. And the thing to remember is that Ron DeSantis is known to almost anyone who follows politics, but polls still show that 10 to 20% of Republicans either haven't heard of him or don't have enough to make his opinion, to form an opinion, and everyone else is less well known.
Right.
This is their first chance to make a first impression, and it's better for them to do that than to deliver the attack on Donald Trump 5 months before the first votes in Iowa.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that differentiation is going to be the real test, I think, for August 23rd in the face of overwhelming similarity, probably on policy. Even though slight differences will be perceived as more valuable, maybe that moment for one of them to catch lightning in a bottle or have that moment to get known and to change the dynamics of the game. Henry Olsen, Washington Post columnist, senior fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center. Always fantastic perspective. Great piece in the Post today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, great perspective there from Henry Olsen in terms of the former president. And he points out two really strong things. Regardless of how you feel about the president, whether you think he's being wrongly treated, whether you think he did anything wrong, just put all of that aside for a minute. Henry Olsen raises two really important points. That the president, the former president, is dealing with two scarce resources, money and time. And in a presidential campaign, if you don't have enough money, if the money's all going towards legal fees, it can't be spent against your opponent. That's a big problem. Time is the other essence. If he's dealing with 4 different cases and jury trials and so on that are going on, can't be campaigning. Time is a big deal. It's a precious commodity for a candidate. So regardless of all the other things going on in the former president's world, I think Henry Olsen got us to think again beyond the headlines in terms of time, money, those precious resources, and what it means to a presidential campaign.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. BYU Fall Camp gets underway this week. Join us each day at 7:55 and 5:55 for updates on the practice mashups and the Big 12 season to come. BYU Sports Insider Mitch Harper will be live with the latest. Mornings and afternoons all week on KSL News Radio, your legacy home for BYU football.
The name's Osborne, Josh Osborne, and I'm so excited to announce our 00 summer sale here at Volkswagen Southtown.
Summers are for thrills, chills, and hot deals. Get a new high-tech VW for nothing down and no payments for 90 days. Our 00 agents are standing by to make sure you pay nothing down and have no payments for 3 months, so you can achieve your top secret mission this summer.
Come see why we're Utah's #1 Volkswagen dealer. Get to VWSouthtown.com.
2022 VW rankings. Financing through VCI on select models OAC. See dealer for details.
Hey guys, if you're a patient at another Wave clinic for ED, Revive will transfer your care for free. And for those that medically qualify, we'll give you 4 Wave treatments for free, plus a 1-month supply of ED medication when you start Wave treatment with us. Our Renaissance Wave therapy is proven, non-invasive, and far more affordable than other Wave clinics. Book your consultation today. Call 801-263-7777. That's 801-263-7777. Or visit ReviveMen'sHealth.com.
Here's a question. Do you wear dentures? At Grandpa's Dental, you can trade in your floppy dentures and get $2,000 towards an implant-supported solution. You know, they say the older you get, the more you need your teeth. Well, chewing your food isn't a luxury. And taking a bite out of a nice, juicy steak, well, it takes teeth. At Grandpa's Dental, they have over 10,000 restorations under their belt, and it's always affordable. When you walk into one of their 3 locations, you're family. Period. At Grandpa's Dental, they live their family legacy by building lasting relationships through state-of-the-art services. So if you want to stop the flop and actually eat foods you can chew, trade in your dentures at Grandpa's Dental for $2,000 toward your implant solution. Schedule your free consultation at grandpasdental.com today. That's grandpasdental.com.
Hey, Derek Overstreet here from the New Millennium Group, financial advisors in Utah. You know, I've been helping people retire in the state of Utah for the last 20 years. The way we do that is we actually find out what is important to you. We create a step-by-step plan that takes into consideration your income, your debt, whether you want money from real estate, stock market, annuities, life insurance, whatever. If you want to deal with professionals, people that are fiduciaries and have a legal responsibility and obligation to do what's in your best interest, give my team a call at 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370. Or go to my website, utahsfinancialplanner.com. If you'd like to retire 3 to 5 years before you thought it was possible, give my team a call right now. 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370.
Hi, folks. It's Doug and Kathy with Window World.
Doug, it's amazing. J.D. Power has named Window World #1 in customer satisfaction again.
It never gets old when your customers say you're the best.
You mean that's not a made-up story?
It's not made up when you take pride in what you do and pay attention to detail.
Enjoy the value thousands of others have experienced. Call the window company you can trust. Window World, 801-281-8111, or visit windowworldutah.com.
And that's no baloney.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, one of the candidates in the Republican primary in Utah's 2nd District set up a series of 10 debates over 2 weeks. One of her opponents says she didn't agree to all of them. Second, firefighters have a wildfire in Tooele County about 80% contained. And third, the U.S. State Department says there's no evidence Russia was behind a coup in the African nation of Niger. There were American troops in that country before the coup. Right now, 86 degrees, mostly cloudy in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Get deeper insights on the news from Inside Sources.
Well, as we continue to watch the run-up to the 2024 election, and of course the nominating process for the Republicans is in high gear already with the debate coming up on August the 23rd. One of those under-the-radar kinds of things that we often miss out on. We talk about the high-level fundraising and we talk about national polling, but we know that it really is about what happens on the ground in places like Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina. Brett Samuels is the White House reporter for The Hill, covers the Biden administration, previously covered the Trump White House and breaking news for The Hill, and had a great piece in The Hill today talking about former Vice President Mike Pence and his super PAC and what they've been doing on the ground in Iowa that I think is really fascinating stuff. Brett, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
So give us a sense of this super PAC from the former vice president, and what exactly have they been doing on the ground in Iowa?
Yeah, so what we've seen is this super PAC that is supporting the former vice president's White House bid called Committed to America. They've essentially put a lot of their resources and their time into Iowa, into knocking on doors, trying to get the word out about Mike Pence's campaign, and really putting a lot of focus into Iowa, which, of course, in January will host the first caucus on the GOP primary calendar. So, you know, they've said that they've managed to knock on about 250,000 doors in Iowa in the 10 weeks since they set up shop. And obviously, the former vice president just announced his campaign in June, so obviously hasn't been up and running for too long. But yeah, the super PAC essentially talking about the door knocking operation and talking about sort of the boots on the ground efforts that they've made to reach out and connect with people face to face, which, as you said, Boyd, is sort of something that tends to sort of fly under the radar, you know, at a time when a lot of the focus is on this upcoming debate and national polls and whatnot.
Yeah, great insight. And I think it's one of those, we actually spoke with the former vice president just on the eve of his announcement. He was cruising through Utah here. We had him on the show. And it's really interesting to me. You talk about those numbers, 250,000 doors knocked. You mentioned in your piece 36,000 likely caucus participants. And there's part of me that kind of thinks back. This is sort of Obama-esque. When he was Senator Obama was really ground game in Iowa. And it feels kind of the same way in terms of really doing that hard work and heavy lifting of campaigning that some of the other campaigns, including the DeSantis campaign, seem to just fly high with a lot of cash, but maybe not making that connection. So as they've been making the rounds there in Iowa, what have they been looking for? What have they been finding in terms of the base?
Yeah, so what we heard from the super PAC in this case was that, essentially that they said that the former vice president is holding steady in second place is what they found. Obviously, that doesn't necessarily align with what we've seen in national polls in particular, but that's what the super PAC has found as they go door to door and talk to these Iowans. And another thing that they found that was interesting was that essentially they said there was, quote unquote, more openness from former DeSantis supporters to the vice president's message. So this idea that the Pence super PAC found that folks who are maybe initially interested in supporting Governor DeSantis but are maybe now a little less sure, that Mike Pence may be gaining some traction with those folks. So certainly we're still, I guess about 5 or 6 months from the caucus, but definitely worth watching and worth noting as some of these folks kind of explore their options and see kind of who they gain traction with essentially at this point.
Yeah, I think that's an important piece of that puzzle, and obviously it'll be interesting to see what happens on the debate stage, and that is an area where the former vice president is still trying to clear the bar to make it on that stage, and I'm sure the efforts in Iowa have to be playing into that calculation a little bit to at least get him on that national stage, and again, try to get some of that traction, some of that momentum going.
Absolutely. That's something that I think Mike Pence is probably the most prominent candidate who we're still waiting to see if he qualifies for that first debate in Milwaukee. And he's met the polling threshold, it seems like, but that donor threshold of 40,000 donors, he's still trying to get there. But, certainly I think that was something that the super PAC kind of indicated, is that they're trying to, essentially as they go door to door and talk with folks, they're trying to encourage them to donate to the Pence campaign. So I think that that's something that there's been, especially in the last couple of weeks, this concerted effort from both the official Pence campaign and from the super PAC to try and get him on the debate stage, since obviously that would be a big platform for him to introduce himself to voters who maybe are still not quite paying tons of attention to the primary at this point.
Yeah, really interesting. And also just because you do cover the Biden administration, it's been very interesting to watch how the president has used both a rose garden strategy in terms of policy, but he's also kind of taken that rose garden on the road in terms of some of the things he's been able to get through, and that becomes a nice leverage point in terms of campaigning without really campaigning. The president is scheduled to actually come through some western states, including Utah and Arizona, New Mexico next week. As you followed the administration, what is it that you're sensing in terms of kind of the landing message, in terms of what we expect to hear from them, especially past Labor Day moving into the fall?
Yeah, I think what we can expect to see is, as you mentioned, kind of both a combination of this rose garden strategy of sort of using the bully pulpit of the White House to get their message out, and really focusing on some of these legislative achievements that we saw, particularly, I think, last year. The Inflation Reduction Act is obviously a big selling point for the administration, which included a lot of sort of climate change provisions and healthcare provisions that the White House had been pushing for, but also pointing to some of these bipartisan bills that were passed, the infrastructure law being one example, this Chips and Science Act, which boosts manufacturing for these semiconductor computer chips. You mentioned that the president will be out west, passing through Utah, and I think the Inflation Reduction Act and sort of the climate aspects of that will be front and center there. So certainly I would expect that to continue, and I'd also expect Vice President Harris, as we've seen, to sort of have a very central role, I think, traveling to various states. We've seen her in sort of this attack dog role going after Governor DeSantis in Florida. So I would certainly expect to see more of that as they kind of wait for the GOP primary process to sort itself out.
Yeah, anything else you're seeing or sensing? I think with the vice president, she's clearly been out more, both amongst the donor class, but also kind of, as you mentioned, in that attack dog role. I think there's some interesting things. I think she's kind of getting her sea legs, it feels like to me, in terms of her role in what the campaign should shake out to be. Anything else you're noticing, or any other trends there that this might be a positive shift or turning point for the vice president?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I think for the first year especially, but arguably even beyond that, I think there was a lot of uncertainty or criticism about how the vice president was being used, about whether she and her team were unhappy, about whether there was any tension with the president's team. But it does seem, especially in the past 6 months to a year, that they've sort of found this groove for the vice president where she speaks a lot about abortion obviously is one issue where she's taken the lead, voting rights being another, and now we're seeing her sort of, I think the way you put it is good, get her sea legs almost, where she finds herself very comfortable sort of being in that attack role, calling out, Republicans, calling out Ron DeSantis for sort of these Florida educational standards that have been a point of controversy. So I think we can expect to see more of that as she sort of settles in and as the campaign views her as an asset, especially with younger voters, with African American voters, those kinds of voting blocks that I think the White House will need to turn out in big numbers in 2024 to win re-election.
Yeah, great insight as always. Brett Samuels, White House reporter for The Hill. And Brett, always appreciate your writing, your perspective, and thanks for joining us on Inside Sources today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Boyd. Appreciate it.
Great perspective from Brett Samuels there from The Hill. And I really think it's so interesting that the former vice president is actually using a strategy, not from his former boss, former President Donald Trump, but from another former president, Barack Obama. So former Vice President Pence really is going at a ground game, data-driven approach to get traction and try to win in Iowa. I think the things that they have uncovered, talking to over 30,000 plus people who are likely caucus goers, are some really interesting points that all the campaigns are going to have to pay attention to moving forward. All right, we're going to step aside for some bottom of the hour news. When we come back, we're going to sort of stay in Iowa just a little bit there. We're going to talk about some interesting polling and some focus groups by Frank Luntz that happened in Iowa. Talk about that coming up next. Stick around.
It's 1:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top local story this hour. A fire that has burned about 600 acres on the Utah-Nevada state line is now about 80% contained. Crews hope rain in the forecast today and tomorrow gets them the rest of the way there. The Bettridge fire started Friday. It's about 20 miles north of Wendover, and they think it was started by lightning. A rigorous 10-day debate schedule in the race to replace Congressman Chris Stewart caused some confusion over which of the three Republicans would be there. Becky Edwards' campaign is not yet confirmed, in spite of Celeste Malloy saying all the candidates are on board. Malloy thought she had informal confirmation from Edwards, but admits her team didn't confirm that before they sent out a news release.
I felt comfortable with it because of my conversation with Becky, but yeah, I wish we'd have gotten the confirmation before it went out.
Bruce Huff's campaign says he'll be at all 10 debates. They start Friday in Davis County, run for 12 days, stretching down to St. George. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. The number of people testing positive for COVID in hospitals is ticking up. The CDC says COVID-19 hospitalizations were up 12% in the week ending July 22nd compared to the week before. ABC News medical contributor Dr. John Brownstein says there's no cause for major worry.
There's nothing really new here in terms of variants. These variants don't cause more severe disease. The current testing works, current treatment like Paxlovid and vaccines, they all work.
Dr. Brownstein says the total number of cases is still pretty low. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average up 60 points on the day right now, but the NASDAQ has been down all day long, right now down 46 points. And our KSL weather, more thunderstorms in the forecast. That's next. KSL News Time, 1:31.
What do you need to hear in the morning to feel ready for the day?
Important news that happened overnight, the traffic you'll hit on the roads.
You'll be ready for your day with us.
Join Utah's Morning News, 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
Can I tell you one of my favorite parts of my SOTA weight loss journey? It's that I've never, ever had anybody ask me, does it work? Because the results don't lie. They can see what losing 37 pounds looks like. And so the questions that I get are not, does SOTA weight loss work? It's, how does it work? And I love to talk about how it works and why it works. SOTA weight loss, SOTA, stands for state-of-the-art weight loss because it is. You have your own coach and dietitian to help you along the way. You have a customized plan. You have weekly check-ins. You can access them by text message if you have a question about something to order at a restaurant or how to stay best on path. I'm over 20 months into my SOTA weight loss journey. And again, no one's asking, Does it work? I'm still 37 pounds down. I feel better than ever, but I can tell you why it works and how it works because it's Soda Weight Loss. It is state of the art. And as I always say, when it comes to your Soda Weight Loss journey, there's no time to lose, only time to win. So start winning today at Soda Weight Loss, SOTAweightloss.com.
At Fisher Investments, our clients know we have their backs.
How do your clients know that?
Because Fisher Investments is a fiduciary, the highest standard for a financial advisor. It means we're there for our clients and always put their interests first.
So wait, you do it because you have to?
No, we do it because it's the right thing to do. Our clients trust us with their retirement savings, and we know how important that responsibility is. So we take the time to really get to know them.
Get to know them how?
We make sure we understand their unique goals, finances, health, family, and lifestyle so we can tailor their portfolio to their specific needs. Our goal is to help them achieve a comfortable retirement.
Sounds like a big responsibility. You must make big commissions then, right?
No, we don't sell commission-based products. We have one single transparent fee that's structured so we do better when our clients do better. Visit FisherInvestments.com to find out why investors like you are switching to us. Fisher Investments. Clearly different money management.
Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
If you've had painful kidney stones, you know you don't want more. Moonstone Stone Stopper is a simple solution that works. Created and recommended by top kidney stone doctors, Stone Stopper is an alkali citrate formula scientifically proven to prevent crystallization. Stone Stopper's patented formula is gentle on the stomach and is available in easy-to-swallow capsules, gummies, and powder drinks that make hydration delicious. Stone Stopper is available at participating Walmart and Walgreens stores. Look for the red stop sign on the bottom shelf of the vitamin aisle. For more information or to find a store near you, go to stonestopper.com.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Granite Credit Union's High Yield Savings Certificates. Here's Ricky Meese.
Emergency crews have responded to a crash involving a bike or motorcycle, Redwood Road at 4th South. Also, an accident called out at 40th South and 4300 West. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Traffic and weather together, again brought to you by Granite Credit Union's High Yield Savings Certificates. Our weather, a high of 92 today, the warmest of the coming week. Mostly cloudy with a chance of thunderstorms this afternoon and tomorrow. And right now, we're at 86 degrees, partly cloudy skies at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Social Security is with you through life's journey from birth to retirement. As your life changes year to year, so do your needs. For over 80 years, Social Security has helped to meet your needs and is committed to improving access to the services that make a difference in your life. Today, you can verify your earnings, estimate your future benefits, apply for retirement, manage your benefits, and even change your address, all from the comfort of your home. Social Security's online services help put you in control with secure access to your information anytime, anywhere, allowing you to spend more time with family, friends, or simply just enjoying the day. Social Security, securing today and tomorrow. See what you can do online at socialsecurity.gov.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
If you're struggling with your mortgage, there's a free government program that offers expert one-on-one advice about your mortgage options. Call 1-888-995-HOPE or visit makinghomeaffordable.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Treasury, HUD, and the Ad Council.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
All right, we're going to stay with the conversation a little bit as it relates to Iowa. Of course, one of those early states in the presidential politics. And we just went through a discussion in terms of some of the strategy. We always talk about the national polls. They're interesting, not always important. We talked about the fact that just today, the super PAC that is supporting former Vice President Mike Pence has been on the ground, has knocked on over 250,000 doors in Iowa, spoken to over 30,000 likely caucus goers who actually cast the votes there in Iowa. And this strategy is very reminiscent not of his former boss, former President Donald Trump, but of former President Barack Obama, who was way, way, way behind Hillary Clinton when it came to the polls, but had a ground game in Iowa that tapped into some core issues and a core message that ultimately carried the day and propelled him into a very competitive presidential race and ultimately to the White House. So we want to stick with Iowa a little bit. We want to dig in just a little bit deeper in terms of those Iowa voters. What are they looking at? What are they looking for? Republican pollster Frank Luntz, a good friend, did a focus group in Iowa talking about the current frontrunner for President Trump. And he wanted to get to the fact that there are some interesting things within the state of Iowa as it relates to the former president. So very interesting. Earlier today on CNN Inside Politics with Dana Bash, Bash asked Frank Luntz about his view of the Republican primary in the early states, particularly Iowa, New Hampshire. Here's Frank Luntz's assessment of the field right now.
It's different in Iowa and New Hampshire because the voters are different. In Iowa, it's much more faith-based, more morals, values. New Hampshire is much more economically based. It's a financial conservative electorate. And in Iowa, which we're going to hear from, the voters like Donald Trump, and they think he's a victim. They think that he's being persecuted is the word I would use. That said, there's a whole lot of them that are looking for somebody else right now because they don't want to relitigate what has happened over the last 7 years. They don't believe in these indictments, but they don't want that to be a sideshow. They want to move ahead rather than looking backward.
Really important perspective there from Frank Luntz, saying, look, the voters in Iowa, the vast majority of them feel like the former president is being targeted or being treated unfairly. They see him as a victim. And this is an important and component. And they don't want to keep looking backwards. They don't want to relitigate 2020. They don't want to relitigate any of the litigation that's actually going on in 4 different places that the former president is dealing with. And this always goes to the point that I try to hammer home to candidates of all kinds, and that is campaigns are not about what was. They're not even about what is. They're always about what's next. And it is very clear that the Iowa voters in particular, while very sympathetic to the former president, don't want to talk about what was. They don't even want to talk about what is or what is around the corner as it relates to indictments. They want to know what's ahead, what comes next. Frank Luntz also gave insight into the demographics of the voters who are still giving the former president really strong support.
It's a socioeconomic level that was once a Democratic voter, which is quite interesting. The people who've come over to the GOP, they gave them the majority in 2016. A lot of them, maybe 15%, have been voting Democrat in the past, and they were simply frustrated, fed up. They feel ignored, forgotten, even betrayed. And there's a level of anger there that brought them to Donald Trump because he represented and offered to be their voice and to speak for them. And what has happened is that group has actually grown over time.
Also interesting, Dana Bash asked Frank Luntz if voters are looking to an alternative to Donald Trump, why is it that the poll numbers still seem so favorable for the former president and less favorable for Ron DeSantis and everyone else?
DeSantis, from the opening of his campaign, has simply not appealed to them. Here's someone with a very strong record in Florida. The voters have looked at this and said, why are you weaponizing government against companies you don't agree with? Why are you taking such an extreme position on abortion when you're selling yourself as a common sense conservative? So there are issues that are driving voters away from DeSantis at the very moment that so many of these Iowa voters are looking for a change.
All right, now I want to get into something that is a real strong suit of Frank Luntz. He is the focus group master. You may remember him from election cycles past. He's the dial tester, really perfected that and really understands what it means to poll test and to focus group messaging. I've seen him do this with members of both political parties. I've seen him do it with think tanks and other groups that are trying to move an agenda. He understands this really well. So in this next piece of sound, we're going to hear from a voter in Iowa who was part of this focus group with Frank Luntz. Dana Bash introduces this moment and this really important component that I think will be central in this whole election cycle, and that is electability. Take a listen.
Then there's the question of electability. That's what they want in the short term. The question is who can beat Joe Biden. I want to listen to a woman that you spoke with as part of the focus group that you did in Iowa.
Obviously, is a very solid base, but that base is not enough. to get him elected. Your base is never enough. You have to get other people. And I don't think Trump can get, everybody is already on the Trump train or never getting on the Trump train again. And the base is very solid, but it's not enough to beat Biden.
And that's what I heard again and again. They're so afraid of giving Joe Biden 4 more years.
So that's a really spot-on conversation with Dana Bash and Frank Luntz. And Frank Luntz talking to those Iowa voters, saying, look, the base is there, the base is strong, but that Iowa voter over and over and over again is saying that's not enough to win an election. It may make you the nominee, but it will not make you the president of the United States. And there are many who are fearful of that. And so the question will then be, is the former president the best chance in the head-to-head against Joe Biden, or is someone else better who can get beyond the base and can get some of those center-left to center-right voters that are part of the crucial coalition that always decides elections? So finally, summing it all up, Frank Luntz gave his takeaways from the focus group by saying this.
In the end, they desperately want to go back. They want to have the benefits of the last 4 years in their perception. They want to have those benefits, but they don't want to be focused on the past. They want to be focused on the future. They want someone to fight for them. They want someone who believes in them, and they believe that Trump did perform. But their doubt is, can he do it again?
Such interesting insight from Frank Luntz. He knows his way around a focus group, and I've been in many of those over the years. I've watched him work the crowd and get the crowd and the focus group into a space where they'll be authentic, where they'll be honest, and where they will even be a little bit vulnerable in terms of what they're feeling. So often in polling and in focus groups, people hold back. They don't share what they're really thinking or feeling, and Frank Luntz is the best of the best. Giving space, creating space for a voter to really share what's going on. And so I think the key takeaway coming out of this focus group in Iowa from Frank Luntz is really what we've talked about before on this show. Elections are not about what was or what is. They're always about what's next. And those voters in Iowa, they do like what was in terms of policy and the benefit that they received from it. They're worried about what is in terms of the indictments and the problems and the relitigation of the past with the former president, and they wonder if he's the one who could actually lead them into what's next. And I think that will be the ultimate decision. I think once we get past Labor Day, past that first debate stage, I think you're going to see a lot of things begin to scramble, because in those early states, Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, there is a voter base there who is really looking for what's next and who can lead to next. All right, we'll step aside for a quick commercial break. When we come back, more Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. Stick around. We'll be right back.
KSL in your community is on the road again at the Utah County Fair. Join Maria Chaleos and Jeff Kaplan's Afternoon News live from the fair, Thursday 3 to 7. Learn about this year's tasty treats, vendors, music, family entertainment, rodeos, and the fair's longtime host city, Spanish Fork. Thursday afternoon on KSL News Radio.
I guess it's human nature, Amanda, that no matter how much money we have in our savings account, it never seems like it's enough. And if you find yourself in that mode right now, let us direct you over to our friends at UCCU. They are wanting to help you supercharge your savings.
UCCU is offering high-rate savings options with yields up to 5.5%. All you do is go to UCCU.com and select a high-rate savings option to do just what you said, supercharge your savings.
You're going to get a much bigger return on your savings right now. It's a savings certificate, which means you make one deposit up front and your money grows over a fixed period of time. So you can have that grow over 5 years, but UCCU has created some very short-term savings certificates with high yields, short like 6 months, 9 months, or a year.
So you decide how long do you want to put that money. You deposit money, a one-time only deposit, and then you let it stay in. The longer it stays in there, the higher the interest rate you earn.
And if you need immediate access to your money, UCCU's Money Market will give you a high yield and anytime access.
UCCU, you're going to love where you bank.
At Fisher Investments, our clients know we have their backs.
How do your clients know that?
Because Fisher Investments is a fiduciary, the highest standard for a financial advisor. It means we're there for our clients and always put their interests first.
So wait, You do it because you have to?
No, we do it because it's the right thing to do. Our clients trust us with their retirement savings, and we know how important that responsibility is. So we take the time to really get to know them.
Get to know them how?
We make sure we understand their unique goals, finances, health, family, and lifestyle so we can tailor their portfolio to their specific needs. Our goal is to help them achieve a comfortable retirement.
Sounds like a big responsibility. You must make big commissions then, right?
No, we don't sell commission-based products. We have one single transparent fee that's structured so we do better when our clients do better. Visit FisherInvestments.com to find out why investors like you are switching to us. Fisher Investments, clearly different money management.
Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
It's camping season and exciting adventures are waiting for you. Don't miss out on another summer of memories and find your next outdoor adventure at Motorsportsland. Get away from the stress of the city in our newly designed Colorado 17 BHC travel trailer for only $16,995 with payment options under $200 a month. It's got bunks and sleeps up to 6 in a super lightweight design towable by most vehicles. Or our fully loaded 31-foot MPG travel trailer with a huge separate bunkhouse and 2 slide-outs at dealer cost for only $38,900 with payment options as low as $400 a month. We have excellent financing as well as zero down options. At Motorsportsland, we advertise real prices and don't charge thousands of dollars in additional required fees. Inventory at these prices is limited, so come in now and let Motorsportsland help you get away.
Let Motorsportsland help you get away.
Motorsportsland.com.
Getting help with plumbing repairs is easier than you think. All you have to do is call Any Hour Services or schedule an appointment at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
KSL Broadcast Group contests are open to participants 13 years of age and older that are residents of Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, and Nevada, unless otherwise specified. Employees or agents of the station, Bonneville International Corporation, or other area radio stations, or any entity associated with the contest may not enter. Persons who have won in the last 90 days from a station contest or event are not eligible. Full general contest rules are available at kslnewsradio.com.
At Shields, we know luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity, which means that during the season, the only element of the hunt that we actually control is the work we put in and the gear we trust. So stop by the Shields sale event July 29th through August 6th and save on brands like Vortex, Raven, Benchmade, and select Shields Outfitters gear. Our Shields experts are ready to prepare you for success on your next adventure. Shields, earn your moment.
Dave and Dujanovic.
We can have disagreements and still be friends. So often, I think people think that just because we disagree, that we're enemies. That we are not. We're great friends, even though we disagree.
I hope listeners take away something new every day, a new detail they hadn't heard before. And I also hope our show opens their minds to new ideas, new ways of thinking of things.
Listen for Dave and Dujanovic 9 to noon on KSL News Radio.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, one of the candidates in the Republican primary in Utah's 2nd District set up a series of 10 debates over 2 weeks. One of her opponents says she didn't agree to all of them. Second, firefighters have a wildfire in Tooele County about 80% contained. And third, the U.S. State Department says there's no evidence Russia was behind a coup in the African nation of Niger. There were American troops in that country before the coup. Right now, 86 degrees, mostly cloudy in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
We're going to go back to a piece recently featured in the Deseret News about the problem of pain. None of us like to feel pain. In fact, a lot of us spend a great deal of time and effort to avoid pain, almost at any cost. But when it comes to prevent pain or alleviate all pain, it actually creates more pain in the end. Scott Rains is a writer and doctoral student at the University of Kansas who wrote the piece for Deseret.com. And I asked him what took him down this path to write this piece of the problem of pain. And I asked him if eliminating it is really the right goal, or should we be thinking about something else?
It was kind of it's a more political piece than I usually write. But many people can't answer the question, if you're progressive, what is it that you're progressing towards? Or if you're conservative, what is it that you want to conserve, right? And I mean, most conservatives, sadly, they want to conserve their bank accounts, and it's ineffective. It's terribly ineffective for any kind of progress that we actually need. But there's a problem among many of the progressive philosophers that there's this inherent moral. The highest moral good is to eliminate all human suffering, and fundamentally, it's an illusion.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to get at. So you cited some really interesting people who are thinking down that path, kind of getting rid of all of those unpleasant experiences. That's what we should do. So kind of take us down that path a little bit. Is that the idea that we should or that we could eradicate all pain?
Right. In the article I cite philosopher David Pearce, who in 1995 he founded what's called the hedonist imperative. And hedonism is the philosophy that you should engage and pursue all pleasure in life to any extent and to all chaos. And he also founded the Abolitionist Project, and he's the one that said that the last human moment of suffering will be a datable event, as if human suffering is, for sure going to be ended in some future date. There's another philosopher named Sam Harris who's maybe more known, recognized name, and he says that pain, 99% of pain, can be eliminated in the mind alone. And he conveniently has this app that you can download, and it costs $120 a year, and he could teach you how to eliminate pain. But C.S. Lewis has this beautiful book called The Problem of Pain, where he addresses the truth that pain is an essential part that lets us be real, lets us be alive, and lets us experience the world.
Yeah, and I think that's an important part. I want to come back to Lewis in just a second. And you're very clear in your piece that, look, of course, we're trying to eradicate and alleviate where possible human suffering, unnecessary, and famines and disease and all those things. Of course, we're going down that path. But if you take that to the ultimate end, if that becomes the end, you go into this great thing of talking about if all we're doing is either numbing ourselves, with medication so we don't feel pain or discomfort, or so we can just go play video games, we sort of lose the real test, which is around meaning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's another philosopher, Yuval Noah Harari, who he claims that computers in the future will be so efficient that he says there will be an excess of humanity, and he put excess in quotes, and he says there'll be nothing else that we can do except just give people drugs and let them play video games, and it's a fundamentally anti-human view that I think is really dangerous, that way too many people just kind of take as given. And but part of that problem is being a human being is painful. Dealing with other human beings that have needs is painful. So if we can just pretend they don't exist and put them in a factory where they take drugs and play games all day, then that solves our problem. We don't have to feel the pain of being our brother's keeper, so to say.
Yeah, such an important thing. So dig into us just a little bit more with C.S. Lewis and explain that problem with pain, and then how we actually begin to apply that here in 2023.
Yeah. So C.S. Lewis, of course, is the great Christian apologist. He was no stranger to pain, right? He served for the British Army in the Great War, or the First World War. He was in the trenches on the front lines in France as a young man. I think he was in his late teens, early 20s. And he was very familiar with pain and what that entails, and the fact that pain gave him meaning in life. And he has another great book called Surprised by Joy. Joy was the name of his wife, and it talks about her passing and simultaneously his conversion to Christianity. And death, gives meaning to someone's life. If someone lives forever in this life, it's like a painting. You have to have a frame around a painting, otherwise it just never ends. And the frame gives meaning to that painting. And death functions in a very similar way. We die to give an end to this life, and that's one of the parts that makes it beautiful and meaningful and painful. But that pain gives it meaning at the same time. It's a paradox, but
yeah, it is. It's that we always talk about it in the context of gratitude and grief. That grief is the great revealer of what you cherish, what had meaning and substance, and so you actually end up having gratitude in that grief. Because it means you actually loved or actually lived or actually learned something. I think that's an important part of all of that. As we bring it full circle, give us a sense. You had another quote from Lewis in there, and talked about this idea that if we completely avoid pain, that actually can become a vice in and of itself. Give us a sense of that.
Right. He has this other great quote. The book is called "The Problem of Pain." And in the book, he makes a theological comment that we would much prefer to have a grandfather in heaven as opposed to a father in heaven, because grandpa in heaven will give us all the candy and all the treats that we want. And, he'll when our parents are mean to us, we can go stay at his house and everything. But, a father in heaven would require he would see something in us as a father does and discipline us towards something that we're capable of. And I think that was Lewis's point, one of his many points. It's a fantastic book. It's probably more relevant today than it was when he wrote it.
Yeah, powerful stuff. Scott Rains, a writer, doctoral student at the University of Kansas. Great piece at Deseret.com. You should check that out today. It'll get you thinking and thinking again as you roll into your weekend. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Boyd.
Hour number 2 of Inside Sources coming up next. Stay with us on KSL News Radio.
KSL FM Midvale, KSL Salt Lake City. Listen on the KSL News Radio app and in your car at 102.7 FM. KSL News Radio, your all-day companion for news.
It's 2 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour: Utah Highway Patrol trooper clocked a motorcycle going 139 miles an hour on I-15 last night. KSL.com reports the officer was able to stop the rider, a 23-year-old man, after he exited the freeway at 123rd South. The man was arrested for reckless driving and improper display of his license plate. Relocating to Utah, it turns out to be not quite as popular as it once was. KSL News Radio's Alexandria Bonilla reports.
Data pointing to a drop in migration next year. Axios and Zillow finding fewer people from large metro areas are looking at listings in Utah. Migration into the state spiked in the last decade, but as interest rates climb and the pandemic settles down, that's slowing down. But fewer people are also interested in moving out of the state, hesitant to put their house on the market because they don't know if they'll be able to find and afford a new one.
The Gardner Institute at the University of Utah tells us if interest rates continue to rise, we could see more of a drop in migration to Utah. Our top national story this hour from ABC News: the streak of 31 days of highs above 110 degrees finally ended in Phoenix on Monday, when the high for the day was only 108 degrees. A meteorologist with the National Weather Service is saying, though, that August could actually turn out to be hotter than July. Your money at this moment: the Dow Jones average up 71 points on the day as we near the close of trading. The NASDAQ has been down all day right now, down 62 points. And our KSL weather, just looking like thunderstorms are going to be part of the picture. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:01.
We have enough people running around Broadcast House at 4 in the morning to field a football team.
Producers, reporters, the traffic team, and us.
This is Tim and Amanda.
Join us each morning from 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
If it's out of sight, it's out of mind. Even though that's an old adage, it's still very true today. And it's especially true of your old 401k. I'm Jeff Jr. with Trajan Wealth, asking you to get that old 401k in sight and out of the company you no longer work for. But don't roll it into your new 401k. That could be one of the worst things you do. Of course that's easy. But when has the easiest way ever been the best way? Instead, call Trajan Wealth and learn about all of your options, including a way to earn an upfront bonus of up to 25% for your future income just for rolling it over. That's right. You could earn up to a 25% bonus for your retirement income just for rolling that 401k over with Trajan Wealth. Don't roll that 401k into your new company plan. Don't do it without calling Trajan Wealth first. Call 801-899-7600 or visit TrajanWealth.com.
Guarantees are based on the claims paying ability of the issuing insurance company.
On Tuesday, August 22nd, the Orrin G. Hatch Foundation will present Senate Leader Mitch McConnell and Secretary Elaine Chao with the Titan of Public Service Award at the Grand America Hotel in Salt Lake City. You're invited to join Senator McConnell and Secretary Chao as tribute is paid for their decades of public service to our country. Reserve your tickets today for dinner and a musical performance by Elizabeth Smart at this special event at OrrinHatchFoundation.org. That's ORRIN Hatchfoundation.org.
You trust us for news and information in your car. Now trust us at home. KSL News Radio is your window to the outside world, keeping you informed on the latest breaking news, weather, traffic, sports, and more. Listen on your Amazon Echo or Google Home device. Just say, Alexa, open KSL News Radio, or listen on the KSL News Radio app. Text the word app to 57500. KSL News Radio, Utah's all-day companion for news.
Join Mike Stevens of Capital Wealth Advisors for Retire Right Radio, Saturdays at 5 a.m. and 9 p.m. That's Retire Right Radio with Mike Stevens, Saturdays at 5 a.m. and 9 p.m.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's high-yield savings certificates. Here's Ricky Meese.
Trouble in traffic in West Jordan, 7600 South, 2200 West. They may be wrapping that up by now. And we also have a crash on southbound I-215's West Belt. This is not far from the Legacy switch-off at about 2800 North. Those vehicles are out of traffic to the right shoulder. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, a high of 92 today, will be the warmest of the coming week. Mostly cloudy with a chance of thunderstorms this afternoon and tomorrow. And right now, 88 degrees, mostly cloudy at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
The Constitution plainly lays out the roles and responsibilities of the president. Some of those include making treaties, appointing judges, determining the military, commander-in-chief, and so on. But instead of focusing on those things in order to win a presidential election, more and more of the modern presidents are focusing on other things like fueling anger and angst and fear and frustration to meet the base emotional needs of those whose votes they hope to get. So let's go beyond the headlines of what it means to be the president and win the presidency. Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
Well, I have been looking forward to this conversation today. Philip Wallach, of course, has been on this program before, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, author of Why Congress, a fantastic book everybody should be reading if you really want to understand the ins and outs there. Phil, you and your co-author on this piece, Mikhail Good, wrote a piece for National Affairs called The Emotive Presidency. And I want to dig into all the nuances of that. It's such a fascinating look at all of this, but kind of give us the baseline in terms of what our presidents have been and what they really seem to be becoming.
Sure. So the presidency has always been an evolving institution. And over the course of the 20th century, you had something that political scientists talked about as the rhetorical presidency, sort of the grand, big speeches laying out these visions that were sort of meant for the president to sort of bring everyone along through the force of the bully pulpit and all that. And over time, people have become pretty cynical about this model because they're so used to sort of feeling that presidents have overpromised, and that the whole premise of sort of bringing us all together in service of the nation starts to seem almost a little hokey in a polarized age. And what we've seen recently is presidents sort of finding their opportunities to express the emotions of their party's base, not really in pursuit of uniting the country, not in pursuit really of even policy making a lot of the time, but just sort of in service of getting the emotions out there, producing a feeling of catharsis for their followers. And to my mind, this is a tremendously unhealthy trend for America's governance, but it seems like it's a bipartisan trend, and it seems like something that we have to reckon with.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I want to unpack that a little bit. And you're exactly right. This is a bipartisan thing. We always say we're equal opportunity offenders on this show, and so I want to go back to the rhetorical presidency just a little bit. You gave some great examples of kind of how that rhetorical component worked or didn't work, or started to create some of that cynicism that you alluded to.
Yeah. So, the paradigmatic early case of it is Woodrow Wilson and the League of Nations. Just sort of this grand vision and this sort of the president presenting themselves as sort of this world historical leader who wants to bring everyone else along with him. And it often didn't work out so well, like it didn't with the League of Nations, where he found that the American people were not actually so enthusiastic about that kind of internationalism after having lost so many men in the First World War. You kind of see presidents expanding their job description well beyond what the Constitution sets out that you noted in your introduction. And so you kind of get away from the idea of the president as the top administrator of the executive branch, which is a big job, and you sort of get more and more into the role of president as prophet almost.
Yeah.
And that's a big change and leaves us with sort of problems on the administrative front.
Yeah.
And also sort of leads to some natural conflicts between the president and a Congress that's likely to be somewhat skeptical of these enormous claims.
Yeah, that's right. And we see that, in State of the Union addresses. We see it on the political campaign.
Yeah.
You noted just some great examples from Reagan to Lyndon Johnson, war on poverty and so on. And so many of those got wrapped up in the rhetorical, but there was never any space for the policy to actually get implemented and done, or the American people buying on to the policy that would drive all of that.
Right. Yeah. There's a tendency to go for these big generalities. Reagan was guilty of this for sure, to sort of embrace some beautiful sounding phrases that turn out to be pretty hollow when you dig into them.
Yeah. And so as you look at how you actually apply those, and again, Reagan, Johnson, so many did the big rhetorical sweeping generalities is definitely what it was. But policy happens in the specifics, in the details. And rather than after this kind of season of rhetorical presidencies, which many thought maybe will swing back to some real serious policy, it actually got worse as we got to the emotive presidencies. And so kind of give us a description of that. And again, we've seen it on both sides of the political aisle.
Right. Well, in the emotive turn is kind of completely detaching from the ambition to do policy making and to inhabit this constitutional role, and instead just embrace the fact that the president is the most famous person in the world. And it feels great to have the most famous person in the world saying things that flatter your sensibilities, right?
Yeah.
So Barack Obama is definitely a pioneer here. You think about the kind of cult of personality that he worked up early on in his term and the sort of phrases he would drop in to sort of show that he was the right kind of person, and he was willing to disparage the wrong kind of person, the clingers, right?
Yeah.
And that stuff isn't good for governing at all, but it does make your supporters feel great. And Trump just ran with that trend. I think it's amazing the extent to which everything for Trump was a slogan meant to deliver the right kind of feelings for his supporters. Even something that sounds very concrete, like building the wall. I mean, that's a pretty specific objective, and yet once he became president, it's not like he was laser focused on getting that done. In some sense, he liked talking about building the wall and how, the stubborn Congress wasn't letting him build his wall as much as he'd like, more than he was really determined to get the thing done.
Yeah, it's so true, and I think you're so spot on. I think what President Obama pioneered, especially as it relates to social media and really validating those emotional components to the voters. Clearly, President Trump perfected it in playing to that emotional
and social
base.
Social media is a really important part of this picture because it does create a change in that basic relationship between the president and the constituents, the voters out there in the country, who are able to feel this sort of reciprocal connection, even if it's not really so robust.
Yeah.
But they're able to feel like they really know this person and it's their buddy somehow. Imagine Calvin Coolidge having to go through Twitter. It's a whole different world.
And we are celebrating the 100th anniversary of Calvin Coolidge being sworn in as president. I think that's actually tomorrow. But if you actually go back and read Calvin Coolidge things, they were actually pretty amazing. It led to some interesting policy pieces as well. Last thing for you before I let you go, Philip, and that is obviously this emotive component. I think it is detrimental. It's way beyond what the duties of the presidency is. Again, it's the executive branch. It's running it, not being this kind of philosopher in chief or prophet in chief or consoler in chief. That's not the job, and we've turned it into something else. What will it take to change that and actually take the presidency back to its constitutional origins and really where it could actually best serve the American people?
Yeah, well, first thing I would say is it sure just would be really helpful if we could just deflate people's sense of the presidency in general and just somehow make it a more modest and limited institution rather than this thing that's supposed to somehow be everything and give you an emotional payoff. And if we could just somehow want less from the president and expect the president to be this administrative figure in charge of governance, but not everything to everyone, that would be a really great development. But it's tough because you can't replace something with nothing. You need something else to take up this space. And so we really need a stronger Congress, a Congress that sort of has a bigger role in the public's imagination and sort of people wanting to get their feeling of being represented. That really needs to happen through a stronger Congress that people feel is really taking on the big challenges that face our country. And of course, that's the message of my book, Why Congress. But I really do think that's got to be the answer on a healthier presidency as well.
This is fantastic insight. Everybody should go read this piece. Philip Wallach, Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, author of Why Congress. And I couldn't agree more that if Congress would do its job, it would make the presidency very different in terms of executing and dealing with the governance component. And if the public's imagination of what Congress could be and should be would actually get better presidents doing the right thing for the American people. Phil, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Boyd.
Great perspective there from Philip Wallach, and I think this is so important. We have emotive presidencies where they're playing to our emotional base and our need to be validated in our own little bubbles. That's not the job of the president. It's governance. It's the executive branch for a reason. It's not the rhetorical branch. It's not the social media branch. It's not the make everybody feel good branch. It's really executive. It's about execution. And we need executives to actually do that. That's something to think again about.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. Before you head to work, before you hit the gym,
Keep going, that's it.
before you make your way home,
Bye.
get a quick check on traffic and weather.
PD on the scene at 8 South and West Temple.
Highway 89 also really backed up. Listen every 10 minutes on the 9s, in your car at 102.7 FM, or tell Alexa, play KSL News Radio.
At Simply Safe, your safety is the only thing that matters. Introducing 24/7 Lifeguard Protection, only from Simply Safe Home Security. Now, monitoring agents can see and speak to intruders through our new indoor camera to help stop crime in real time and for fast police response. Get 20% off any new system with Fast Protect monitoring at simplysafe.com/radio. Advanced home security, 24/7 professional monitoring for less than $1 a day. There's no safe like Simply Safe.
Military veterans and active duty service members, you could become a certified cyber warrior with just 12 weeks of training at My Computer Career. Cybersecurity specialists are in high demand, and IT pros with these skills often enjoy abundant opportunity and a great lifestyle. Protect our people, liberty, and treasured institutions from cyber threats. GI Bill, SkillBridge, and other VA benefits are available to those who qualify. Learn more at mycomputercareer.edu/CWP. That's mycomputercareer.edu/CWP.
Smart, connected, modern. Discover life-enhancing independent living services at Trio South Ogden. They do things a little differently there because you're different. With everything you need to support your best self, you'll find that joy isn't just for the young, it's for the young of heart. Trio South Ogden's signature programs provide a unique approach to wellness that brings living well and well-being to life. To learn more, contact Trio South Ogden at 801-475-4004 or visit triosouthodden.com.
How's the water where you live? Depending on where you live in Utah, the water coming out of your tap might be really hard and not taste very good. It might be leaving spots on your glasses and shower and leaving your skin dry.
We want you to know our friends at Superior Water and Air have solutions for your home and your business, by the way. They have the best, most efficient water softeners in Utah, but not only that, they also have water purifiers that will give your family crystal clear drinking water.
And if you're still using those big unsanitary water bottles in your office, let Superior hook you up to a more convenient, trusted water system.
When you think of Superior Water and Air, think of solutions for everything in your home, from plumbing to water heaters to furnaces and air conditioning, and of course those great home standby generators.
To keeping the air in your home as healthy as possible, especially during these inversions. I had Superior install 2 things in my home that have helped us so much. We have an air purifier and a humidifier hooked right up to our furnace.
Call Superior today, 974-9090, or go to superiorwaterandair.com.
Mom and Dad used to argue about everything, especially about Dad's drinking. It drove me crazy. It got so bad, I couldn't do my homework. I couldn't concentrate. I absolutely refused to let any of my friends come to our house for any reason. I would have been humiliated if anyone found out how much my dad drank and how loud my mom screamed at him. My family went from totally crazy to quiet, calm, and even peaceful. The only thing that happened is my mom started going to Al-Anon family groups. Her relationship with my dad really changed. I asked Mom if she would take me to her Al-Anon meetings or to Alateen. I wanted to see if I could have a better relationship with my dad. I'm sure glad I did. If someone's drinking troubling you, you might be surprised at what you can learn in an Al-Anon or Alateen family group from people just like you. Call 1-888-4-ALANON or go to alanon.org.
It's only a minute of news. How long could it take?
I do a lot of surfing late at night. I'm looking at all my favorite internet sources, Wall Street Journals, New York Times. People throw me ideas, but when I sit down in the morning and it's time to write, it has to resonate with me. I have to have something to say about it. It is my minute of news.
Jeff Kaplan's Afternoon News, 3 to 7 on KSL News Radio.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, a UHP trooper clocked a motorcycle at 139 miles an hour last night. The driver's been arrested. Second, fewer people are relocating to Utah, in part because of high interest rates on real estate loans. Third, Phoenix finally got a break from 110-degree temperatures. The high yesterday was only 108 degrees. 88 degrees right now in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
Well, This past weekend, I had the wonderful opportunity to have the legendary Washington Post columnist George Will join me for the Sunday edition. If you didn't know, I'm also doing the Sunday edition on KSL TV. Airs at 9 a.m. on Sunday morning. You can also catch it on the KSL TV app, of course. And George Will is a national treasure. He just is. Anybody who can write 100 columns a year for almost 50 years now, that's a lot of words. That's a lot of writing. But more importantly, it's a lot of thinking, which is where George Will's power really is. So we talked about a wide range of issues, and I wanted to share a couple of those with you today here on radio. We talked about the cultural divides in the country. We talked about the upcoming election. And, of course, no conversation with George Will is complete without a little bit of baseball talk, so we got to that as well. We started with the Biden administration facing resistance and the Supreme Court ruling against the student loan forgiveness program.
Well, the scale of the spending involved in the loan forgiveness that the president tried to bring off was $430 billion, which would have made it one of the largest domestic programs in U.S. history, is relevant to the major questions doctrine. What the court said was, President Biden purported to find authorization for this in the HEROES Act, which was passed to ease the difficulties of soldiers and others disrupted by 9/11 who had student loans to pay. The president, 20 years later, takes this and says, well, the authorization to modify these loan agreements means I can cancel the loan agreements. The Supreme Court said, not so fast. If Congress wants to do something that large, this is the major question. If there's a major question at issue, Congress ought to say so clearly and explicitly, which of course it did not do in the HEROES Act 20 years ago. This is not the first time, and it will not be the last time that the Supreme Court has said that Congress must step up, act responsibly, take responsibility, and be clear. Some people have said, well, this is the court being imperial. No, it's not. This is the court asking the Congress to be more imperial, asking the Congress to put the executive branch on a short leash. The Article III courts are doing for the first branch of government, the legislature, an assistance in coping with the rampant second branch, the presidency.
Yeah, and it does seem that the court continues to say, Congress, just do your job. We'll deal with the interpretation of that on the back end. Another area where Congress doesn't seem to be doing its job, or seems to be a lot more in the shoulder shrugging versus shoulder squaring, is when it comes to spending. We know the debt continues to rise at exponential rates. Give us some sense in terms of what's happening there and why both the left and the right seem to just shrug their shoulders and continue to spend without any real restraint.
Well, we know what the driver of the structural debts are. They are Social Security and Medicare. We have an aging population. We have 10,000 baby boomers retiring into Social Security and Medicare every day. By the time they've all retired in 2030, the average age of the American population, coast to coast, will be higher than the average age of the population in Florida today, and Florida is justly known as God's antechamber. So the problem is that we have an aging population. We have driving the great spending on entitlements for the elderly. By the way, I'm not against the elderly. I am elderly. I'm older than Joe Biden, which means I'm older than the mountains in Utah. But this is the problem. And during the president's State of the Union address, he said, well, I will not touch Social Security and Medicare. Not only did Democrats jump up and cheer, Republicans jumped up and cheer. And the president was so stunned by this bipartisan nonsense that he says, well, I'm glad to see we're all in agreement. Well, Donald Trump, the leader at the moment for the Republican presidential nomination, says, I wouldn't touch Social Security and Medicare. Ron DeSantis, the fading number 2 at this point, has said, I won't touch them, which means that both parties are more or less formally committed to doing nothing about the most predictable crisis in American history because it's driven by demographics. It's baked in the cake.
Yeah, so interesting. And it is that absolute predictability of consequences that no one in Congress seems to be really interested in. You've really spent a lot of time talking about this whole idea of community and culture leading as opposed to politics shaping things. Where are we in that stance, or are we just simply going to undulate along as a nation, and where does that actually lead us?
The problem is, as you know, you're a veteran of Washington. People know the problems are coming, the problems are intensifying, but they plan to be gone by the time the crisis arrives. Let me tell you a story. Shortly after the Indiana primary in 2016, when Donald Trump secured the nomination for the 2016 nomination, his people brought him back to Washington to be briefed on some issues. They gave Paul Ryan, who's then Speaker of the House and a great expert on budgetary matters, they gave him 20 minutes to brief the nominee Trump. Trump listened for 5 minutes, waved his hands and said, yeah, I got that, but I'll be gone when that happens. That's the problem. No one expects to be here when the crisis occurs.
Yeah, and that is that short-sightedness, that instant gratification seems to be what's really driving all of that today. Real quickly, George, before we take a break, there seems to be this growing space where the center-left to center-right in the country is starting to at least begin to realize that they actually are the majority. The loud left and the noisy right seem to be getting in the way of a lot of that. Where are we in that context, and is there space for that movable middle to actually step forward and move the country?
I think if the Republicans nominate someone who gives this dynamic middle a voice, you're going to see it's going to be like oxygen hitting a spark. There'll be an explosion of gratitude on the part of the country. And I think that's still quite possible. And of course, if they don't, if the political market does not work, that is, doesn't supply what the country is demanding, if the political market instead supplies Biden-Trump 2.0, there's no labels waiting in the wings. And they will produce a third-party ticket, and then things will really get interesting.
We're going to stay with the conversation with George Willigan. That was from Sunday edition on KSL TV over the weekend. You can only see that at 9 a.m. on Sundays. And we're going to stay with that conversation, more insight from the always interesting George Will coming up next. Stick around. We'll be right back.
It's 2:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. Our top story this hour, 10 Republican primary debates are scheduled in the race to replace Congressman Chris Stewart over the next 2 weeks. They're being led by candidate Celeste Malloy, but Becky Edwards' campaign has not yet confirmed that she'll be there, in spite of Malloy's claims that she would be. Malloy admits her team didn't confirm that before sending out a news release.
I think it's an unfortunate miscommunication. I talked to Becky Edwards herself over the weekend and asked her if she was going to debate, and she said yes, and gave me a contact on her team. So I told my team she was going to come to the debates and gave them the contact.
Bruce Huff's campaign has agreed to be at all 10 stops. These debates start August 4th and run through the 14th, run from Davis County to St. George. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. A federal grand jury met today in Washington, D.C., signaling that another indictment could be in the works against former President Donald Trump. This one would involve January 6th and the attempts to overturn the 2020 election. ABC News senior reporter Catherine Faulders says the special counsel has dug deep in this investigation.
He's not just spoken to senior officials like the former vice president or Trump's former chief of staff, Mark Meadows. He's spoken to lower level officials, those on the former president's security detail, for example, Secret Service detail. So it appears that throughout the course of this investigation, he's really left no stone unturned.
Trump is already facing 2 other indictments, one involving hush money payments in New York State and the classified documents case in Florida. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average closing trading 71 points up on the day. The NASDAQ, though, was down 62. The S&P 500 down 12. And our KSL weather. Today is the warmest day of the next 7. We'll have that for you coming up next. KSL News Time 2:31.
Start your days with knowledgeable, friendly voices telling you about the latest news and weather out there.
Hi, this is Tim Hughes and Amanda Dixon
In the business of waking you up each morning from 5 to 9.
on KSL News Radio.
The next disaster is coming. The time to get ready is now. Make a plan. Identify meetup locations and people you'll need to contact. Put your contact list in your wallet, on your phone, and somewhere visible in your home. Build a kit. Store enough food and water for 3 days. Don't forget your pets. And consider buying a pre-made kit. Keep at least 7 days of medication on hand. Work with your pharmacist and insurance company to secure the extra doses. Make copies of important documents. Keep them on your phone, in the cloud, or on a USB stick. Stay informed. Learn about local hazards. Take courses in CPR and first aid. And sign up for local alert systems. An early warning can give you the time you need to prepare for a fast-moving disaster. Be ready. Learn more at americares.org/sendusin.
I've worked hard to get where I am. I don't cut corners. I see opportunity and make the most of it. And I'm celebrating that success in style by heading to Jerry Seiner Cadillac to get the car I've been working for. They have new XT4, 5, and 6 models in stock and the area's largest selection of certified pre-owned vehicles. I've put in the work and I've earned the luxury that only comes with a Cadillac. If you have too, then it's time to visit Jerry Seiner and experience the Seiner difference.
Dave and Debbie.
One of my favorite things about Debbie is when we're in the middle of an interview, a light flips on and there's something that she picked out. I call it her spidey sense. And then she just tenaciously goes after that line of questioning. If someone tries to spin it, she's respectful, but she's firm. And she won't let you go with just that easy, trite answer. She's going to get down to the bottom of it, and I love it.
I've always been impressed with Dave's ability to go back in his memory bank and drag out factual details from previous interviews, weeks, months, even years ago. It is phenomenal to watch that happen because it adds so much context to our coverage in the moment. Dave's got it all right up here in his brain, and that's impressive.
This is a thing that Debbie does not do well. On-the-fly math.
I agree. So one thing I agree with him on.
Listen for Dave and Dejanovic 9 to noon on KSL News Radio.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Granite Credit Union's high-yield savings certificates. Here's Ricky Meese.
It's a delay-free drive on all of your Valley freeways. We do have the final clearing of a crash southbound I-215's West Belt. It's going to be just after the Legacy switch-off at about 2800 North on the right shoulder. Also, a crash in Draper, 7th East, 122nd South, and a car versus a building in South Salt Lake at State Street, approximately 3800 South. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, the high of 92 today will be the warmest of the coming week. Mostly cloudy with a chance of thunderstorms this afternoon and tomorrow. And right now we're at 88 degrees and partly cloudy at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
We're staying with the conversation just a little bit longer today. I want to go to a portion of my interview with George Will, of course, legendary Washington Post columnist. Has been doing that for almost 50 years now. The conversation was actually on Sunday Edition, which airs every Sunday on KSL TV. And I've taken over that show, so you can always tune in on a Sunday morning, or you can catch it on the KSL TV app. George has such unique perspective from over the decades, but he is an extraordinary thinker. He's a tremendous writer. I think he's a national treasure. So we were going through and we were talking about some of the real challenges that we face in the nation. And we actually talked about something that you can see this Sunday on Sunday Edition, my conversation with Rabbi Joe Charnas, talking about how do we redeem our dialogue. And so I asked George Will about the culture that seems to be dividing the country, and especially amongst our elected officials. Here's his response.
There's no substitute for the simple, obvious answer. We have to change the kind of people we're putting in our highest offices. I'll give you an example. Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida, who has a brawl a day with Disney or someone else, is now in a brawl against Bud Light. Trying to imagine Dwight Eisenhower or John Kennedy taking time from their busy schedules and the dignity of their offices to cuff around and box the ears of a beer company. I mean, this country has serious problems. Bud Light isn't one of them. So we just have to get, I know this sounds banal, but it's true. We have to get a more serious cohort of people in high office.
Yeah, we get past the performative politics, I think, is a big piece of that. And Mr. One of the things that you've done for almost 5 decades now is write every week. And it seems that we've lost that ability to write deeply, which prevents us from thinking deeply. I'm one of those who believes you don't know what you really think until you write it down. How do we get away from just the tweet, the quick hit, the instant certainty of the take, and get back to a more contemplative kind of view of where we are as a nation?
Well, I've never tweeted. I don't know how to tweet. I'm told I have a Facebook page, but I've never seen it. I write 100 columns a year, 750 words apiece. You can do an awful lot in 750 words. You can't do an awful lot in 240 characters except be enraged. Social media, by its very brevity and its instantaneous distribution, encourages extremism, vituperation, and rage. So if people would do what reading requires attention. It requires sustained attention. It requires something more than a few characters attention span. So we have to get people back to this. We have to get them to turn off talk radio, shut down cable television. The good news, Boyd, is that there are 333 million people in this country, and at any given moment, 325 million of them are not watching cable television and they're not listening to talk radio. They're getting on with life, which is why we can isolate and quarantine the fanatical fringe.
Yeah, that's such an important part of that, and getting back to the things that do matter most. I know you have a bit of an affinity for baseball, and you've spent a lot of your career talking about things that we should conserve in our constitutional republic, and you've written this year in particular with some of the changes to baseball, how change actually can be part of a good conservation project.
There's no question. If you want things to stay the same, you have to change. People say, oh gosh, they're changing baseball. No. What they've done is, by banning the shifts, by forcing the action to speed up, by getting batters to stay in the batter's box, which the pitch clock does, what they have done is restore baseball as we knew it when we fell in love with it in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. It's in recent decades when baseball slowed down and surrendered to the 3 true outcomes: a strikeout, a home run, or a walk. That's when baseball changed, and this is not change. This is restoration, a good conservative aspiration.
Yeah, I think that's such an important part of the program there. And as you've watched our politics over the decades, there's obviously a lot to be pessimistic about when it comes to our politics. But what is it that actually gives you hope for the future of this country?
First, no one ever got rich betting against the United States. We are so good at creating wealth that not even the government can stop us with it. We have an industrious population, educated population. We got 7 of the 10 greatest world universities and their wonderful research and development energy that they infuse into the country. The United States still has, with its continental market, a kind of economic muscle that no one else in the world, just look at the European Union, which has more people, but not nearly the dynamism. Furthermore, the bad news is that in recent years, we've seen the power of one man to change the tone of the country for the worse. I think the flip side of that is, okay, let's get a better person to change the tone of the country for the better. I think that's going to happen.
Yeah. And finally, Mr. Will, what's the one thing that we're not thinking about or that we're not talking about in the country that's been on your mind, kind of that under the radar thing that maybe could change that course just a little bit?
Well, I'll give you two things. Wonderful things are going to happen in the next 10, 20 years from molecular biology. We are going to eliminate entire classes of disease. Now, that's going to be a problem because we're going to extend life. Longevity is a great social achievement. We've made wondrous achievements in that, and we're going to make bigger ones because of DNA and all the rest. It's going to put additional pressure on the entitlement systems, but still, it's just a sign of the fact that progress in America is real and stunningly dramatic. We're so used to it, we sometimes don't even notice it. But things are getting better in the United States.
That's my conversation from the Sunday edition on KSL TV with legendary Washington Post columnist George Will. And there's so many pieces to unpack there in terms of some of the things that he laid out in terms of what it will take to change the course of the conversation in this country. And a lot of it is we got to change the players who are leading those conversations or giving voice to those conversations. And there's a component that comes to all of us as well. I love the fact that Mr. Will pointed out that no one has ever gotten rich betting against the United States of America. I firmly believe that, and why we can be pessimistic about our politics. I've never been more bullish about the future of the country because of the people and because of communities like we have right here. And the fact that people do come together, they do solve problems, they do help a neighbor in need, they do reach out. They make all of those things happen outside of government. Government has a role, to be sure. But as we learned earlier on in the program today, we've sort of lost what the presidency is about. It's an executive role. It's a governance role. It's not a rhetorical role. It's certainly not a social media role. And so we're going to round out our program today kind of getting back to this whole idea. And we're going to get past the emotive presidency or the vituperative presidency that Mr. Will just described in terms of the kind of rhetoric coming from those in the Oval Office. And we're going to go to one Calvin Coolidge, who was sworn in 100 years ago. Stick around. It'll be a great conversation coming up next.
School is out and the weather's warm. Summer's here. Hi, I'm Jay Broadbent at Alpine Home Medical. We offer you the best quality products as well as excellent customer service. Whether you're in one of our 10 retail stores or shopping online, we'll provide you with the best experience possible. From CPAPs to compression stockings to portable oxygen concentrators to wheelchairs and scooters, you won't find a better selection anywhere. Our staff is here to find exactly what you need. And that's the reason why Alpine Home Medical has been voted Best of State in medical supply every year since 2009. When you're in need of medical supplies, we promise you'll find what you want at Alpine Home Medical. If not, we'll find it for you. Don't have time to come in? Shop online at alpinehomemedical.com. That's alpinehomemedical.com.
Alpine Home Medical, we bring wellness home.
At Fisher Investments, we do things differently, and other money managers don't understand why.
Because our way works great for us.
But it may not work for your clients. That's why Fisher Investments is a fiduciary, obligated to put clients first. It's the highest standard for a financial advisor.
So, what do you provide? Cookie-cutter portfolios like the rest of us?
No cookie-cutter portfolios here. Fisher Investments tailors portfolios to meet each client's goals and needs.
But you do sell investments that earn you high commissions, right? And make commissions when you make trades for your clients?
No, Fisher Investments doesn't sell any commission investment products, and we never earn commissions on trades.
So what's in it for you?
Fisher Investments fees are structured so we do better when our clients do better. When it comes to helping clients achieve a comfortable retirement, we're clearly different. Visit FisherInvestments.com to find out why investors like you switch to us. Fisher Investments, clearly different money management.
Investments in securities involve the risk of loss.
You trust us for news and information in your car. Now trust us at home. KSL News Radio is your window to the outside world, keeping you informed on the latest breaking news, weather, traffic, sports, and more. Listen on your Amazon Echo or Google Home device. Just say, Alexa, open KSL News Radio, or listen on the KSL News Radio app. Text the word app to 57500. KSL News Radio, Utah's all-day companion for news.
Getting help with electrical repairs is easier than you think. All you have to do is call Any Hour Services or schedule an appointment at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
At Social Security, we are always thinking of ways to save you time and make things easier. That's why we created My Social Security. Opening a My Social Security account gives you secure access to your personal record and interactive tools tailored for you. You can see if you are eligible to receive benefits, view spousal benefit estimates, and compare retirement benefit estimates at different ages or dates when you want to start receiving benefits. Already receiving benefits? Use your account to change your address, set up or change direct deposit, get a proof of income letter, and more. In most states, you can also request a replacement Social Security card. Save time. Go online. Open a My Social Security account at ssa.gov/myaccount. Social Security, securing today and tomorrow.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
Victor deployed for the first time to Afghanistan in 2003. At 4 a.m, my phone rang. They said, "I regret to inform you that your husband was wounded in action." Victor sustained a moderate traumatic brain injury. I was doing school full-time, and I was also then caring for Victor. One of the most important elements of caregiving is taking care of yourself. I just didn't want to forget that I also had goals and that I also had a life. What I did is I challenged Victor to meet me halfway. There are almost 6 million military and veteran caregivers across the nation. We have our own journey, and we can fulfill that journey at the same time that we are helping our loved one.
Visit aarp.org/caregiving for a free military veterans guide to navigate your caregiving journey and better care for your loved one and yourself. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
I'm Andy Farnsworth from KSL News Radio.
And I'm Kellyanne Halverson.
And we're hosts of KSL's Fan Effect podcast.
That's Fan Effect with an E.
We're excited to share with you our knowledge
and arguments
on everything pop culture and fandom, featuring movie and television reviews, pop culture deep dives into video games, cosplay, fandom events, and more. Listen regularly on your favorite podcast platform at kslnewsradio.com, kslpodcasts.com, or on the KSL News Radio app.
And remember, that's Fan Effect with an E.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, the leader of a drug ring in southern Utah has been sentenced to 10 years in a federal prison. Second, one of the candidates for Congress in Utah's 2nd District thought she'd set up a series of 10 debates with the other Republicans in the race. One of them says she didn't agree to all of them. And third, a grand jury met today in Washington as part of the investigation into the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. This could result in another indictment of former President Donald Trump. Right now, 88 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
As we come full circle today, I want to go back to this idea of what is the job of the President of the United States. It is an executive branch for a reason. And presidents should focus on fulfilling that core responsibility, taking care that the laws be faithfully executed. It's not to be subject to swinging to the whims of the public. It's not about trying to pander to the public. And our constitutional republic gets thrown out of balance when presidents try to be representatives rather than executives. And we've seen that, especially if you listened earlier in the program. We had a great conversation talking about this very idea of going from an executive president to a rhetorical president to an emotive president. And we've seen that over the years, and sometimes with the rhetorical presidencies, a lot of high aspirations, a lot of lofty ideals, and for some, that leads to a little bit of cynicism. If it's all about just the soaring rhetoric, sometimes you end up coming up a little short when it comes to governing and to the actual policies. Over the last two presidencies, we've seen that taken to this emotive presidency. Again, Phil Wallach helped us break all of that down, particularly with President Barack Obama and President Donald Trump, who really used social media to go to not what they should be doing in terms of governing, but what they thought their supporters wanted to hear. They wanted to validate those people where they were. And this emotive presidency, as described by Wallach, is a derangement. So it retains the flaws of the rhetorical presidency, but then it has this change of not aspirational, but it's really focused on fueling indignation and that populist grievance mentality. And so we actually want to round out the show today celebrating someone who was not an emotive president in any way, shape, or form, not even necessarily a soaring rhetoric kind of president, Calvin Coolidge. Now, we are celebrating the 100th anniversary of President Calvin Coolidge's inauguration. His inauguration was incredibly unique in our nation's history. It actually took place at Plymouth Notch, Vermont. So Coolidge was actually asleep at his childhood home in Vermont when news came that President Warren Harding was dead. So by candlelight, Coolidge's own father, who happened to be a notary public, administered the oath of office to the new president. So a pretty interesting beginning for someone who would not be the rhetorical or the emotive kind of president, but one who got to the business of the American people. I think he's one of the most underappreciated presidents that we have. And so I actually want to go and share with you something that Calvin Coolidge shared on the 150th anniversary of the country. So July 4th, 1926. And I want to share some of the things that he said we should be thinking about as a nation. I think they're pretty indicative of what we really ought to be thinking about or thinking again about today. So Coolidge began, he said, it was not because it was proposed to establish a new nation, but because it was proposed to establish a nation on new principles. That's why July 4th, 1776 has come to be regarded as one of the greatest days in history. Great ideas do not burst upon the world unannounced. They are reached by a gradual development over a length of time, usually proportionate to their importance. This is especially true of the principles laid down in the Declaration of Independence. 3 very definite propositions were set out in the preamble regarding the nature of mankind and therefore of government. These were the doctrine that all men are created equal, that they are endowed with certain inalienable rights, and that therefore the source of the just powers of the government must be derived from the consent of the governed. So that's the beginning of Calvin Coolidge, celebrating the 150th anniversary of July the 4th and the Declaration of Independence. Coolidge went on to say, a spring will cease to flow if its source be dried up. A tree will wither if its roots be destroyed. In its main features, the Declaration of Independence is a great spiritual document. It is a declaration not of material, but of spiritual conceptions. Equality, liberty, popular sovereignty, the rights of man. These are not elements which we can see and touch. They're ideals. They have their source and their roots in the religious convictions. They belong to the unseen world. Unless the faith of the American people in these convictions is to endure, the principles of our declaration will perish. We cannot continue to enjoy the result if we neglect and abandon the cause. Not rhetorical, not emotive. Pretty common sense, which I think was a hallmark of Calvin Coolidge. It was the practical, tactical side that helped foster a very prosperous time in our nation's history. Coolidge went on to say, "We are too prone to overlook another conclusion. Governments do not make ideals, but ideals make government. This is both historically and logically true. Of course, the government can help to sustain ideals and can create institutions through which they can be better observed, but their source, by their very nature, is in the people. The people have to bear their own responsibilities. There's no method by which that burden can be shifted to the government. It is not the enactment, but the observance of laws that creates the character of a nation." And finally, Coolidge said about the Declaration that there is a finality that is exceedingly restful. Love that. It is often asserted that the world has made a great deal of progress since 1776, that we've had new thoughts and new experiences which have given us a great advance over the people of that day, and that we may therefore very well discard their conclusions for something more modern. But that reasoning cannot be applied to this great charter of the Constitution. If all men and women are created equal, that is final. If they're endowed with inalienable rights, that is final. If the governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed, that is final. No advance, no progress can be made beyond that proposition. Now, as we look at how that actually plays out, he says, those who wish to proceed in that direction of undermining those sound principles will deny history and move backward to a time when there was no equality, no rights of the individual, no rule of the people. That's not progress. So from Calvin Coolidge, this idea that the ideas are not more modern, but more ancient, that is the key to the success of the nation. Now, none of that, of course, could be put into a very pithy meme or social media post. No one could take a selfie in front of Coolidge and think that was the real cool thing to do. But yet, he was an executive in the executive branch as President of the United States. He talked about principles. He talked about sound policy. He wasn't obsessed with placating or pandering to the emotions of those who he hoped would vote for him. He went with principle and policy, and that's what made a difference, and that's what we got to get back to. I'm Boyd Matheson. Thanks for joining us on Inside Sources today here on KSL News Radio. And as always, as you go out into the world today, make sure